We are hearing a lot of talk across the supply base and from the OEMs directly that they're starting to have much more requirements around shop floor digitalization and capability monitoring for critical and significant design characteristics directly from production lines. And there's a lot of work planned within 2026 and the coming years to start sharing a lot of that information live and daily, and sometimes with the OEMs directly. And so that's a lot of new requirements for suppliers that I think are going to be critical to start continue being competitive in the market in the next couple of years.
And what's at stake if a supplier doesn't meet these new requirements?
There's a growing concern, I think, for a lot of suppliers that these will be mandated requirements for all net new programs. And so, if a supplier doesn't implement some of this live monitoring of characteristics, critical characteristics in production as they're producing the parts, and can't send those directly to the OEMs, there is a likelihood that they might not be as competitive for new programs and might see more digitalized and forward-looking suppliers start winning those programs.
Some suppliers might think that the OEMs are forcing unfair expectations on them. Do you think that's fair?
I think there's a big push for Industry 4.0 that has been ongoing across the industry over the last decade with expectations of, automation, and much more automation being implemented in production. And then more recently, a lot of traceability. A lot of that is stemming from needs to deal with warranties, and just get a lot more acceleration and speed across the supply chain and visibility across the supply chain. I think this is just the next step into that same direction that we've been going into over the last decade. And now is just moving not just from, reporting your throughput or production volume numbers, but really, and not just about containment of warranties, but really staying ahead and making sure we're proactively meeting those requirements and, not getting into the direction that we're only looking back at failures that are already experiencing, but becoming more proactive, predictive. So I think this is actually a small step in that direction, but I think an important one to help both OEMs and others contain warranties and other costs across the industry and ultimately minimize waste.
Hmm. Do you think there are any misconceptions that suppliers might have about any coming requirements like this?
One thing I've seen that OEMs are really creating a comprehensive roadmap for how suppliers can take a stepwise approach to meet some of those needs. So the nice thing, it's not an unreasonable expectation that you're digitalizing and measuring everything across production perfectly from day one. It's really a stepwise approach where, you're ensuring connectivity across various data sets that you're creating within production, whether it's FMEAs, your control plans. And then really the next step is being following through with those requirements, measuring those critical and significant characteristics to make sure there's continuous visibility within your production. So to make sure it's running on plan. And really then automatically sharing those with the OEMs so that as you're shipping parts, you're also shipping kind of that digital record along with it. And so I think some of those steps in the roadmap are really a good way to help someone build those capabilities up over time, rather than, expecting all forms of real-time monitoring of every asset, every equipment, every part fully. So I think that there is that roadmap to help suppliers gradually digitalize their operations. And then there's companies like us where we're here to support some of those efforts and really help pave the way to get there.
Hmm. some suppliers may have already undergone similar digitization projects that have failed to deliver ROI or have been really expensive for them. How can suppliers avoid that trap?
I think it really comes back to what the OEMs are requesting. And, a lot of digital efforts often that we see that don't go quite as planned are this big initiatives to create a perfect digital twin of your production, where basically we're seeing manufacturers get into the trap of, I need perfect data from every asset and I need to have perfect collection in place. And until that's done, we cannot leverage that data for effective improvements or ROI in production. And what that often starts to create is this multi-year effort to gather, and digitalize every asset, gather all of the data. And that's often kind of misaligned with the needs or actual challenges that might be faced on the production floor. Where we're seeing a change in a difference in how the OEMs are approaching this is that they're really starting with the key characteristics that are driven from the designs and are really those characteristics that they'd like to be controlled during production. So it's very contained and directive in terms of what they'd like to be measured. And so having that guidance in place, starting from those areas that are already being enforced to be controlled through the process, and then having connectivity back with OEMs where that data is shared, I think that contains that requirement quite a lot. And based on that, really make sure that any investment is really, could help the manufacturer, the supplier themselves, make sure that they're running on plan and continuously producing parts that are in spec, but also that there's that accountability and meeting of expectations of the OEMs today and in the future.
Where can suppliers find more information to prepare them for dealing with these increasing OEM requirements?
We are also actually going to be running a webinar on December 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern, where we will dissect a little bit what the requirements are and what kind of options you as a supplier might have in implementing the right technologies and the right approaches in your production to meet those requirements and really demystify some of this in terms of how complicated it might seem.
Thank you so much for chatting about this, and hopefully we'll see anyone who's watching at the webinar on December 11th. You can sign up in the link below. Thanks.